Picture a vessel the length of 4 football fields, carrying more than 6,000 souls across open water. It houses restaurants, theaters, swimming pools, hospitals, power plants, water treatment facilities, and an entire universe of hidden machinery working every second to keep this floating metropolis alive. These ships burn through enough fuel each day to power a small town. They generate their own electricity, produce their own fresh water, and process waste for thousands of people simultaneously. And yet, to the passengers strolling the promenade deck with a cocktail in hand, it all feels effortless, smooth, safe, permanent. But permanence is an illusion at sea. Beneath the polished veneer of luxury and leisure lies a complex web of engineering, human coordination, and calculated risk. Every cruise ship is a controlled experiment in physics, a gamble against weather, mechanics, and human error. When the systems work, you get paradise. When they fail, you get something very different. The question isn't whether cruise ships are safe or dangerous, efficient or wasteful, marvels or mistakes. The question is, how does something so massive, so complicated, so inherently vulnerable, manage to function at all? This is the story of what really happens when you put a city on the ocean, not the story you see in glossy brochures or Instagram posts, but the one playing out in engine rooms, crew quarters, water purification plants, and emergency operations centers. It's a story about scale, about hidden labor, about the ocean's indifference to human ambition, and it begins with a simple truth that every sailor knows, but every passenger forgets. The sea does not care about your vacation. Modern cruise ships are not boats. They are not even ships in the traditional sense. They are architectural experiments, defying intuition and gravity in equal measure. The largest vessels afloat today stretch over 1,300 feet from bow to stern and rise more than 20 decks above the waterline. They displace over 200,000 tons, which is roughly the weight of 2,000 blue whales or 15 Eiffel Towers. To call them large is inadequate. They are floating neighborhoods, complete with zip lines, ice rinks, climbing walls, botanical gardens, and multi-story shopping malls. The numbers become surreal when you start counting people. A single modern megaship can carry 6,000 to 9,000 passengers and crew combined. That's more than the population of many small towns, all crammed into a space smaller than a city block. Every one of those people needs to eat 3 meals a day, sleep in a clean bed, shower in fresh water, and use functioning toilets. They need air conditioning when it's hot, heating when it's cold, entertainment when they're bored, and medical care when they're sick. They produce waste food, scraps, sewage, trash, laundry at a staggering rate. And somehow, the ship has to handle all of it, continuously, without pause, while also moving through the water at 20 to 25 knots. To understand how this is possible, you have to understand buoyancy, but not the simplistic version you learned in school. Yes, a ship floats because it displaces water equal to its own weight, but floating is only half the battle. Staying upright is the other half, and that's where things get complicated. Cruise ships are deliberately designed with a low center of gravity, achieved by placing the heaviest components, engines, fuel tanks, water storage, ballast tanks, deep in the hull. Above that foundation, you can stack all the lightweight aluminum and fiberglass you want. Cabins, theaters, pools, buffet halls. As long as the center of gravity stays below the center of buoyancy, the ship remains stable. But stability is dynamic, not static. Every time passengers move from one side of the ship to the other, every time cargo is loaded or unloaded, every time fuel is consumed or water is pumped from one tank to another, the balance shifts. Engineers calculate this obsessively, monitoring weight distribution in real time. If too much weight accumulates on one side, the ship lists. If the list exceeds a certain angle, it becomes self-reinforcing. More weight slides toward the low side, pulling the ship further over until it capsizes. This is not a hypothetical danger. It has happened, and when it does, the results are catastrophic. Then there's propulsion. Unlike smaller boats that rely on outboard motors or sails, cruise ships use massive diesel engines or gas turbines to drive propellers the size of a 2-story house. Some newer ships have switched to electric propulsion systems, where the engines generate electricity that powers motors connected to azimuth thrusters, propellers, that can rotate a full 360 degrees, giving the ship extraordinary maneuverability. This is essential when docking in crowded ports or navigating narrow channels, where a few feet of clearance can mean the difference between a smooth arrival and a collision that costs millions. But propulsion alone doesn't make a ship move efficiently. Hull design matters. Modern cruise ships use bulbous bows, those strange underwater protrusions that look like tumors on the front of the ship. They're not aesthetic features, they're hydrodynamic tools. The bulbous bow creates a wave that interferes with the bow wave generated by the ship's forward motion, reducing drag and improving fuel efficiency. At cruising speed, this can save hundreds of gallons of fuel per day. It's the kind of invisible engineering that passengers never see, but that makes the entire operation economically viable. Power generation is another challenge altogether. A cruise ship needs electricity constantly for everything from lighting and air conditioning to elevators, cooking equipment, water pumps, and navigation systems. Most ships generate their own power using diesel generators, producing anywhere from 60 to 100 megawatts of electricity, enough to supply a small city. This power is distributed through miles of electrical cables, running through every deck, every corridor, every cabin. If those cables are damaged, if a generator fails, if a fire breaks out in the engine room, the consequences cascade instantly. No power means no propulsion, no steering, no lights, no refrigeration, no water pressure, no sewage pumps. The ship doesn't just stop moving, it stops functioning. Backup systems exist, of course. Redundancy is built into every critical system, but redundancy has limits. When multiple failures occur simultaneously, a fire that spreads to electrical cables, a loss of power that disables firefighting, pumps the ship, enters a state of emergency that can spiral out of control within minutes. This is why maritime engineers obsess over fault tolerance, why crew members drill endlessly for scenarios they hope never to face. Because at sea, there is no calling for help and waiting for someone to arrive in 5 minutes. Help is hours away, sometimes days. You fix the problem yourself, or you live with the consequences. Navigation has evolved dramatically since the days of sextants and paper charts, but it hasn't become foolproof. Modern cruise ships use GPS, radar, sonar, electronic chart systems, and automatic identification systems that broadcast their position to nearby vessels. They have gyroscopic stabilizers that reduce rolling in rough seas, making the ride more comfortable for passengers. They have weather routing services that analyze forecasts and suggest optimal courses to avoid storms. And yet, despite all this technology, ships still run aground. They still collide with underwater obstacles. They still make navigational errors that lead to disaster. Why? Because technology is only as good as the humans using it. A GPS system can tell you exactly where you are, but it can't stop a captain from making a reckless decision to deviate from a planned route. Radar can show you what's ahead, but it can't see underwater rocks in shallow water. Sonar can map the ocean floor, but only if someone remembers to turn it on and pay attention to the readings. Maritime disasters are rarely caused by a single catastrophic failure. They're caused by chains of smaller failures, each one compounding the last, until the system collapses. The crew hierarchy on a cruise ship mirrors a small military operation. At the top sits the captain, who holds ultimate authority over every decision made aboard. Below the captain are department heads: the chief engineer, the staff captain, the hotel director, the chief security officer. Each department has its own chain of command, its own responsibilities, its own daily routines. The deck officers handle navigation and ship operations. The engineering officers manage propulsion, power generation, and mechanical system. The hotel staff, by far the largest group, handles everything related to passengers: food service, housekeeping, entertainment, guest services. This division of labor is essential because the workload is immense. On a typical day, the galley staff prepares and serves over 20,000 meals. The housekeeping team cleans thousands of cabins, changes tens of thousands of linens, washes mountains of towels. The laundry facility processes several tons of fabric every single day: sheets, towels, napkins, uniforms, passenger clothing. The maintenance crew inspects and repairs equipment constantly because in the harsh marine environment, everything corrodes, everything wears out, everything breaks eventually. The medical staff treats injuries, illnesses, and emergencies. With limited resources and no ability to transfer patients to a hospital until the ship reaches port. And all of this happens while the ship is moving, rolling gently in the swells, sometimes pitching in heavy seas. Try cooking for 1,000 people when the floor is tilting 5 degrees every few seconds. Try changing a light bulb on a ceiling that won't stay still. Try diagnosing a medical emergency in a cramped clinic with basic equipment while the patient is seasick and the nearest trauma center is 300 miles away. The ocean makes every task harder, every mistake more consequential. Daily operational rhythm on a cruise ship is relentless. There are no weekends, no holidays, no breaks. The ship operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for months at a time. Crew members work contracts that last 6 to 9 months, living in shared cabins far below the passenger decks, often with no windows, no personal space, no privacy. They work long shifts, 10, 12, 14 hours, then return to cramped quarters to sleep and do it all again the next day. Fatigue is constant. Homesickness is common. Burnout is inevitable. Yet the passengers see none of this. They see smiling waiters, cheerful entertainers, spotless decks, perfectly timed meals. They see a machine that runs smoothly, a vacation that unfolds without friction. This is intentional. The entire design of a cruise ship is meant to separate the experience from the labor, to create an environment where comfort and pleasure feel natural rather than manufactured. It's a theater of ease, and the crew are actors trained never to break character. But behind the scenes, in the machinery spaces and crew areas that passengers never enter, the reality is different. The ship is loud, engines roar, ventilation systems hum, metal clangs against metal. It's hot in the engine rooms, cold in the refrigerated storage holds. It smells like fuel, grease, cleaning chemicals, and sometimes worse. It's a place of constant vigilance, where a single mistake can have catastrophic consequences, and everyone who works there knows it. Luxury is the story cruise ships like to tell. A perfect sunset framed in glass, soft piano music in the atrium, endless buffets where plates never seem to run out and tables never sit unclean for long. To most passengers, the ship feels like a 5-star resort that just happens to move. The floor does not shake, the lights do not flicker. The engines are a distant rumor. You unpack once, and entire countries glide past your balcony, as if the world has been put on a conveyor belt for your convenience. From the moment you step into the terminal, the illusion begins. You drop off your luggage, and hours later, it magically appears outside your cabin. Your keycard not only opens your door, but buys your drinks, tracks your photos, and tells the ship who you are and where you belong. Elevators hum, air conditioning whispers, cool air, and a steady supply of hot water waits behind every tap. It feels seamless because thousands of tiny processes are choreographed so carefully that you never see the seams. This smoothness is not an accident. It is the product of obsessive planning, strict routines, and an invisible army of workers. Schedules run down to the minute. Embarkation times, lifeboat drills, meal services, theater shows, poolside games, cleaning rotations. Every department has a playbook, and every day on board is a repeat performance with tiny variations. For the passengers, that repetition translates into predictability and comfort. For the crew, it becomes the relentless beat of life at sea. The difference between what passengers experience and what actually happens behind the scenes is like the difference between a restaurant, dining room, and its kitchen. On a cruise ship, that metaphor stretches across the entire vessel. The glamorous top decks, pools, lounges, viewing platforms are the dining room. Everything below the waterline and much of what lies between is the kitchen. You are encouraged to forget the kitchen exists. The ship succeeds when you never stop to think about where the water comes from, where the waste goes, or what it takes to deliver a clean towel to your cabin every morning. To grasp the full scale of this separation, you have to picture the ship as two overlapping worlds. One is the visible world, the public decks filled with sun, music, and carefully staged adventure. The other is the hidden world, a labyrinth of narrow corridors, noisy machinery, storage spaces, and crew cabins that trace the same length and height as the passenger areas, but with an entirely different mood. These two worlds share the same hull and the same fate, yet rarely meet. By now, the idea of a floating city might sound like a poetic exaggeration. It is not. On the biggest ships, the sheer number of people on board rivals an entire small town. If you took the passenger list and crew manifest and printed them out, you would have thousands of names arranged, like the census roll of a remote community. Yet, unlike a town, this population is constantly in motion, new residents arriving every week, old ones departing, only a core of long-term inhabitants remaining. The crew. Cities depend on infrastructure, power plants, waterworks, food supply chains, waste treatment, transportation networks, hospitals, police, and fire services. Cruise ships replicate all of these systems in miniature. They must generate their own electricity, distill their own fresh water, store enough food to feed thousands of people, and manage the enormous volume of waste produced by that many bodies. They need medical facilities capable of stabilizing serious conditions, security teams that function like a cross between law enforcement and private guards, and safety teams trained to fight fires and coordinate evacuations. Think about water alone. A large cruise ship can use hundreds of thousands of liters of fresh water every day. Passengers take showers, brush teeth, fill glasses at restaurants, swim in pools, and soak in hot tubs. Laundry machines churn endlessly. Kitchens need water for cooking, cleaning, and sanitation. The ship cannot simply load all of that from port every time. It would be impractical. So it makes its own. Using powerful desalination plants, seawater is drawn in, filtered, heated, and forced through membranes that strip out salt and impurities. The result is drinkable water, constantly produced and continuously monitored for quality. Food is another staggering calculation. Kitchens must anticipate not just how much food is needed, but what kind and when. Thousands of people eating 3 meals a day, plus snacks, room service, and special events, add up to an enormous logistical challenge. Storage spaces deep in the ship hold frozen, chilled, and dry goods in bulk. Orders are placed weeks in advance based on historical patterns and booking data. Entire teams exist just to plan menus, track stock, and rotate supplies to avoid waste. What looks like a casual buffet is the final stage of a supply chain that begins long before the passengers ever see the ship. Waste management completes that cycle. Every meal served, every drink poured, every shower taken produces waste in some form. There is food waste, packaging, glass, metal, paper, plastic, and of course, human sewage. None of it can simply be ignored. Solid waste is sorted, compacted, incinerated, or stored for offloading in port according to strict rules. Sewage is treated in advanced systems that break down and purify it before it is discharged or stored. Gray water from sinks and showers goes through its own treatment process. These operations are tucked away far from passenger areas, running almost continuously, unnoticed yet absolutely essential. Electricity ties all of this together. Massive generators, usually powered by heavy fuel oil or marine diesel, feed energy into a complex grid that snakes through the entire vessel. Every light, every elevator, every refrigeration unit, every water pump, every entertainment system depends on that flow of power. Engineers must balance, load, prevent overloads, and maintain generators under high demand. If the power fails, the illusion of the floating city shatters immediately. Air conditioning fades, lights go dark, pumps stop. Within minutes, the ship's comfort begins to unravel. Ventilation systems are another quiet lifeline. With thousands of people breathing, cooking, showering, and moving in an enclosed space, air quality would deteriorate quickly without constant circulation. Fresh outside air must be drawn in, filtered, cooled, or heated, and distributed. Stale air must be expelled. Ventilation tunnels and ducts run like hidden arteries through the vessel, feeding cabins, corridors, theaters, and dining room. In certain emergencies like smoke from a fire, these same systems become potential hazards, if not carefully controlled. All of this infrastructure competes for space with something else. People, cabins, restaurants, theaters, gyms, shops, and lounges take up prime real estate because they generate revenue and define the passenger experience. Behind the walls and beneath the floors of these glamorous spaces lie cables, pipes, ducts, and machinery. Designing a cruise ship is a constant negotiation between what passengers see and what the ship needs to survive. If you remove the decorative layers, you would see an industrial skeleton far more crowded and intricate than most buildings on land. As impressive as this engineering is, it does not exist in a vacuum. Economic pressure shapes every part of the cruise ship's design and operation. These vessels cost hundreds of millions, sometimes over $1 billion, to build. They only become profitable when they sail full or nearly full, week after week, for years. More cabins mean more ticket sales. More restaurants and attractions mean more onboard spending. More efficient engines and hulls mean lower fuel costs. The result is a relentless push toward scale. Bigger ships with more features, more passengers, and more revenue potential. Yet, paradoxically, the bigger these ships become, the more vulnerable they are to certain types of failure. A small coastal vessel can more easily divert to a nearby port during trouble. A megaship carrying thousands of passengers cannot fit in every harbor. It needs specialized terminals, deep water, and tug support. Every itinerary must be planned not just around scenery and tourism, but around infrastructure that can physically accommodate the ship. When something goes wrong far from such a port, the challenges multiply. Life at sea also sits at the intersection of many different laws and jurisdictions. A cruise ship may be built in one country, registered under the flag of another, staffed by crew from a dozen nations, and visit ports in several more. Different rules apply depending on where the ship is, what flag it sails under, and whose waters it enters. Maritime law, international regulations, company policies, and local port rules weave together into a complex legal fabric that governs everything from safety standards to labor conditions. Often, ships register under so-called flags of convenience, countries whose regulations, taxes, and labor laws are more favorable to the company than those of the nations where most passengers come from. This can reduce costs and simplify certain operations, but it also raises difficult questions. Whose standards matter most at sea? Who is responsible when something goes wrong? And how do you enforce accountability in a space that is, by design, hard to pin to any one jurisdiction? In ordinary operations, most passengers never think about these questions. As long as the drinks are cold, the shows start on time, and the ship arrives at each port as promised, the legal and economic machinery remain invisible. But these hidden frameworks shape cruise life in subtle ways. They influence how many crew members are hired, how long their contracts last, how much they are paid, and what resources are available for training and maintenance. They also influence how much leeway a captain or company has in making decisions when safety and cost pull in opposite directions. This tension between appearances and realities becomes even sharper when considering the environmental footprint of a floating city. These ships burn huge amounts of fuel, emit significant greenhouse gases, and can impact marine ecosystems through emissions, ballast water, and waste discharge, if not properly controlled. Regulations have tightened in recent years, pushing companies to adopt cleaner fuels in certain regions, install exhaust scrubbers, and upgrade waste treatment systems. Yet, the core paradox remains. The more people the cruise industry moves in comfort across the ocean, the more strain it can place on that very environment. At the same time, cruises bring substantial economic benefits to many coastal communities. Ports that welcome large ships see surges of visitors who spend money on tours, food, shopping, and attractions. Jobs are created in tourism, transportation, and services, and port fees become an important source of revenue. Towns that once relied on seasonal industries or declining trade routes can reinvent themselves as cruise destinations. For some, the arrival of a ship is not just a spectacle, it is a lifeline. But this influx is not evenly distributed, nor is it without cost. When thousands of passengers pour into a small town for a few hours, local infrastructure can be overwhelmed. Streets fill, popular sites become crowded, and businesses may begin catering almost exclusively to cruise visitors, reshaping the local economy. Some residents welcome the growth. Others see it as a form of invasion. The ship becomes both guest and intruder, bearer of income and agent of change. The floating city does not just pass by. It leaves a footprint on every port it touches. Because of this, public opinion on cruise ships is perpetually divided. For some people, a cruise represents the ultimate dream vacation. Unpack once, see multiple destinations, never worry about logistics. For others, the idea of being trapped on a vessel with thousands of strangers is unsettling. They see the environmental costs, the labor issues, and the vulnerability that comes with being far from shore. The reality lies somewhere in between, layered with contradictions. Cruising is both highly regulated and oddly free, heavily engineered and surprisingly fragile, deeply global and strangely isolated. Inside this contradictory world, the human experience remains at the center. Passengers board with expectations, relaxation, adventure, escape, maybe a celebration, or a sense of ticking something off a bucket list. Many crew members board for very different reasons: employment, remittances for families back home, a chance to see the world, or simply a job in a competitive economy. Their lives intersect for a few days or weeks inside the same steel shell, but under wildly different conditions. Crew areas, hidden behind locked doors and unmarked stairwells, feel like another universe entirely. Cabins are small, often windowless, built for function rather than comfort. Recreation spaces exist, but they are modest. A crew mess for meals, a small lounge, perhaps a gym or a smoking area on an outside deck where staff can catch a brief breath of sea air between shifts. The mood in these spaces is practical, sometimes weary, occasionally joyful. Languages from across the world blend into a unique onboard dialect of shared experience. Routines shape crew life with a rigidity most passengers would find shocking. Housekeepers may clean dozens of cabins each day, following strict checklists. Galley workers chop, stir, fry, bake, and clean in a never-ending cycle keyed to dining room schedules. Engine room staff monitor gauges and alarms around the clock, often in 12-hour rotations. Officers plan routes, review weather, hold safety drills, and file endless reports. Few onboard roles fit into a simple 8-hour day. When the ship is at sea, it is always on, and so are the people who keep it running. This intensity produces a unique psychology. Time stretches and compresses at sea. Days can blur together as ports repeat. Safety drills recur, and entertainment programs loop through their schedule. For passengers, this can feel like a pleasant dream state where worries from land recede and a curated world takes over. For crew, it can become disorienting. Weeks pass without setting foot on land. Personal life becomes confined to brief messages, home, hurried video calls, or shared jokes in the corridor before heading back on duty. Cultural diversity is both a strength and a challenge on board. Crew members may come from dozens of countries, speaking many different languages, bringing their own customs and expectations. Training and company culture attempt to unify them toward a common goal: service, safety, and efficiency. But beneath the uniforms, people still carry their own stories, families waiting at home, ambitions for the future, sacrifices made to be here. Bonds form quickly in this environment because everyone, regardless of background, is living through the same demanding conditions. Passengers, too, bring their own expectations and preconceptions. Some treat crew with kindness and patience, recognizing the effort required to maintain their comfort day after day. Others see only the surface, the uniform, the smile, the scripted greetings. Interactions can range from deeply human moments, a conversation about home, a shared laugh over a spilled drink, to brief, transactional exchanges that barely acknowledge the person behind the role. On a ship, as in any city, empathy is unevenly distributed. At the same time, the ocean exerts a constant psychological influence on everyone aboard. Even when the water is calm, there is an awareness, sometimes conscious, sometimes buried, that you are surrounded on all sides by a vast, indifferent expanse. Beyond the railings, there is no sidewalk, no quick escape, no friendly neighbor's house. There is only open water and whatever the weather chooses to become. For some, this realization is thrilling, a reminder of adventure and exploration. For others, it is quietly unsettling. This tension between wonder and unease is part of what makes cruise ships so compelling. They promise the safety and convenience of a hotel combined with the primordial drama of the sea. They are monuments to human ingenuity and also stark reminders of human limitation. The same vessel that hosts weddings, honeymoons, and once-in-a-lifetime vacations carries, in its metal bones and emergency plans, the memory of every ship that has ever gone wrong. And sometimes, inevitably, things do go wrong. Storms intensify more quickly than expected. Mechanical systems fail in unexpected ways. Fires start in places that were supposed to be secure. Human decisions made under pressure, in uncertainty, or with incomplete information prove flawed. In those moments, the floating city reveals its most vulnerable truth. For all its layers of steel and systems, it remains a guest on the ocean, never its master. The ocean does not negotiate. It does not pause when systems fail or offer second chances when mistakes compound. When a cruise ship encounters serious trouble at sea, the environment that passengers found so peaceful moments before transforms into something far less forgiving. Waves that rock them gently to sleep can grow into walls of water that slam into the hull with terrifying force. Calm horizons can vanish behind sheets of rain and lightning, and the distance that once felt romantic miles of open water, no land in sight, becomes a measure of isolation. Storms are the most obvious threat, but they are also among the most predictable. Modern weather forecasting gives ships hours, sometimes days, of warning before severe conditions arrive. Captains adjust routes, increase speed to outrun storm fronts, or delay departures to avoid the worst weather entirely. Stabilizers help reduce rolling, and the ship's sheer mass acts as a buffer against all but the most violent seas. For passengers, a storm usually means choppy water, a few seasick stomachs, and maybe some spilled drinks. The ship itself handles it without drama most of the time, but occasionally, storms exceed expectations. Freak waves, massive swells that rise suddenly out of otherwise moderate seas, can strike with little warning. These rogue walls of water can be twice the height of surrounding waves, powerful enough to shatter windows, flood decks, and injure anyone caught outside. Even inside, the ship can heel sharply, sending furniture sliding, dishes crashing, and passengers scrambling for handholds. In those moments, the illusion of control evaporates. The floating city becomes a toy in the hands of forces it cannot resist. Fire is another nightmare scenario, and one that requires no storm to trigger. Ships are packed with flammable materials, fuel, fabrics, furniture, food oils, cleaning chemicals, and electrical systems run everywhere. A short circuit, an overheated engine component, or careless disposal of a cigarette can ignite a blaze. Once started, fire spreads quickly in the confined spaces of a ship, fed by ventilation systems and slowed only by fireproof bulkheads designed to contain it. Smoke fills corridors, making navigation nearly impossible. Alarms wail, passengers panic. Crew members must fight the fire while also managing evacuation and preventing the spread of chaos. The most dangerous fires occur in engine rooms, where heat, fuel, and electrical cables converge. A fire there can cripple propulsion and power generation simultaneously, turning the ship into a drifting hulk. Without electricity, pumps stop working, which means firefighting systems lose pressure. Emergency generators kick in, but they supply only critical systems: navigation lights, emergency lighting, communication equipment. Everything else goes dark. Air conditioning fails, and temperatures rise. Refrigeration stops, and food begins to spoil. Toilets back up because sewage pumps are offline. What begins as a mechanical failure cascades into a full breakdown of the ship's life support infrastructure. When power is lost far from shore, the ship must be towed. Tugboats are dispatched, sometimes taking hours or even days to reach the stricken vessel. In the meantime, passengers and crew endure conditions that bear no resemblance to the vacation they signed up for. No hot meals, no showers, no entertainment, no lights except dim emergency strips. In some cases, military helicopters have delivered emergency supplies, food, water, portable generators to keep people fed and safe until rescue arrives. The contrast between expectation and reality becomes brutally clear. Mechanical failures extend beyond fires. Propulsion systems can suffer catastrophic breakdowns, sheared propeller shafts, failed bearings, turbine malfunctions. Steering systems can jam or lose hydraulic pressure, leaving the ship unable to turn. Anchors can fail to deploy or, worse, fail to release, trapping a ship in place. Even with redundant systems, the sheer complexity of a modern cruise ship means there are countless points of potential failure. Engineers work constantly to prevent these failures, but prevention is never perfect. Human error remains one of the most persistent vulnerabilities. A captain who deviates from a planned route to sail closer to shore for a better view can run the ship aground on underwater rocks or reefs. A navigation officer distracted for just a few seconds might miss a collision warning. A crew member who skips a routine maintenance check might overlook early signs of equipment failure. Fatigue plays a role too. Long hours, repetitive shifts, and the relentless operational tempo of a cruise ship create conditions where lapses in judgment become more likely. Some of the most infamous maritime disasters in recent history have been traced back to decisions made by individuals under pressure. Captains ordered off-course maneuvers that brought ships into shallow water where they should never have been. Ships struck rocks that were clearly marked on charts but ignored in the moment. Evacuation procedures were delayed or mishandled, turning survivable incidents into tragedies. In the aftermath, investigators always ask the same questions. Why was the decision made? What information was available? Could it have been prevented? The answer is almost always yes. It could have been prevented, but prevention requires perfect execution across hundreds of decisions made every day by dozens of people. One weak link is enough. One moment of inattention, one skip protocol, one miscommunication between bridge and engine room, and the chain of events leading to disaster begins. This is why safety drills are mandatory, why checklists are obsessively detailed, why redundancy is built into every critical system. The margin for error at sea is razor thin. Outbreaks of illness add another layer of risk, one that became painfully familiar in recent years, when thousands of people share dining rooms, elevators, handrails, and entertainment spaces. Infectious diseases spread with alarming speed. Norovirus outbreaks have long been a known hazard on cruise ships, causing severe gastrointestinal illness that can sweep through passengers and crew in a matter of days. More serious illnesses can turn a ship into a floating quarantine zone, with infected passengers isolated in their cabins and ports, refusing to allow the vessel to dock. Medical facilities on board are equipped to handle routine problems, broken bones, infections, heart attacks, but they are not hospitals. Doctors and nurses work with limited equipment, limited supplies, and no ability to transfer patients until the ship reaches port. When an outbreak occurs, the medical team becomes overwhelmed quickly. Cabins turn into makeshift isolation wards. Crew members deliver meals to doors. Public spaces are closed and disinfected repeatedly. The ship's normal rhythm collapses under the weight of mass illness. Port logistics become critical during emergencies. Not every harbor can accommodate a large cruise ship, and not every port authority is willing to accept a vessel with active health or mechanical problems. Ships have been turned away from port after port, forced to keep sailing in search of a place that will let them dock. Passengers become desperate. Crew members exhausted. The floating city that promised freedom and adventure instead becomes a prison, adrift, and unwelcome. Rescue operations at sea face their own challenges. Lifeboats are designed to hold everyone on board, but launching them in rough seas is dangerous. Passengers must be organized, calm, and capable of following instructions under stress qualities that are not always present during emergencies. Crew members are trained to manage evacuations, but training is one thing, and reality another. Panic spreads quickly in confined spaces. People get separated from family members. Elderly passengers struggle with mobility. Children cry. Language barriers complicate instructions. Even in the best-case scenario, a full evacuation is a chaotic, time-consuming process. Helicopters provide another rescue option, but they can only lift a few people at a time and require stable conditions to operate safely. In high winds or at night, helicopter rescues become extremely risky. Coast Guard and naval vessels can come alongside to take on passengers, but that requires calm seas and precise maneuvering. In the worst situations, where the ship is sinking, on fire, and far from help, rescue becomes a desperate race against time. Not everyone makes it. These scenarios are not hypothetical. Over the decades, cruise ships have caught fire and burned for days while passengers huddled on deck. They have lost power and drifted helplessly, their toilets overflowing and food running out. They have struck rocks and capsized, partially sinking in full view of the shore while rescue crews scrambled to pull people from the water. They have been abandoned by their own captains, leaving passengers and entertainers to coordinate their own rescue. Each disaster teaches painful lessons, and each one reshapes regulations, procedures, and ship design. The most expensive disasters, measured in dollars, often involve total or near total loss of the vessel. A ship that costs $1 billion to build and then runs aground and capsizes becomes a staggering financial catastrophe. Salvage operations to refloat and tow such a vessel can take years and cost hundreds of millions more. Then comes scrapping, cutting the ship apart piece by piece, a grim reversal of the process that built it. Insurance companies absorb some of the cost, but reputational damage to the cruise line is harder to quantify and can linger for years. The human cost, of course, transcends any financial calculation. Families lose loved ones. Survivors carry trauma long after they return to land. Crew members who fought to save passengers relive the chaos in their memories. Communities that depended on tourism, income, suffer when ships stop visiting. And the ocean, indifferent as always, continues its rhythms, claiming wreckage and secrets alike. Yet despite these risks, millions of people continue to cruise every year. Ships continue to sail, ports continue to welcome them, and new vessels continue to be built. Why? Because the odds, statistically, remain in favor of safe passage. Modern ships are far safer than their predecessors. Regulations have tightened, technology has improved, training is more rigorous. The vast majority of cruises end exactly as planned, with passengers disembarking, tired, sunburned, and full of photos. But the ocean does not care about statistics. It only cares about the moment when systems fail, when decisions prove wrong, when the margin for error is exceeded. And in those moments, the floating city reveals its deepest truth. It is not invincible. It is a testament to human ingenuity, yes, but also a reminder of human fragility. We build these massive vessels, pack them with people and dreams, and send them out across water that was here long before us. and will remain long after. The fascination with cruise ships, then, is not just about luxury or adventure. It is about the paradox they represent. They are cities that move, machines that float, ecosystems that must sustain themselves in one of the harshest environments on Earth. They promise escape from the ordinary and deliver it, most of the time, but they also carry within them the ancient tension between human ambition and natural forces, between control and chaos, between the world we build and the world that exists beyond our blueprints. In the end, every cruise is a negotiation with the ocean. The ship offers comfort, structure, entertainment, and the illusion of permanence. The ocean offers passage, but only on its terms. It does not bend to schedules or ticket prices. It does not care about the passenger's vacation plans or the crew's exhaustion. It simply is vast, powerful, and utterly indifferent. And the fact that we sail across it anyway, in ships the size of skyscrapers, carrying thousands of lives, is perhaps the most remarkable and audacious thing about modern sea travel. If you're enjoying this journey into how cruise ships really work, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss what comes next. The industry has learned hard lessons from every disaster, and those lessons are written into the design of every new ship that slides down the launching ramp. Bulkheads are stronger, fire suppression systems more sophisticated, evacuation procedures more rehearsed. Backup systems have backups. Communication networks are redundant. Crew training now includes scenarios that once seemed unthinkable, because experience has shown that the unthinkable does, occasionally, happen. Still, no amount of engineering can eliminate risk entirely. The ocean will always find the weak points, the unanticipated failures, the moments when everything that could go wrong does. Sailors have known this for thousands of years. The difference now is that when a modern cruise ship encounters trouble, it carries not a few dozen crew members, but thousands of people who never signed up for danger. They signed up for a vacation, and that disparity between expectation and reality, between marketed image and operational truth, defines the uncomfortable space cruise ships occupy in our imagination. They are spectacles of human achievement and cautionary tales in equal measure. They are monuments to comfort and potential disasters waiting for the wrong set of circumstances. They are workplaces, homes, entertainment complexes, and emergency response challenges all rolled into one massive, moving structure. And they are, above all, a testament to our desire to explore, to move, to see the world without leaving behind the comforts of modern life. The ocean remains what it has always been, beautiful, brutal, and indifferent. We cross it in ships that dwarf anything previous generations could have imagined. We do so with confidence, technology, and carefully calculated risks. And most of the time, we arrive safely on the other side. But every sailor, every crew member, and every honest captain knows the truth. The sea does not owe us safe passage. It tolerates our presence. And the moment we forget that, the moment we become complacent or careless, the ocean will remind us exactly where we are, adrift on the surface of something far larger and older than ourselves. That is the real story of cruise ships, not the glossy brochures or the Instagram sunsets, but the constant, invisible work required to keep a floating city alive. The tension between wonder and danger, the fragile agreement between engineering and entropy, the millions of decisions, large and small, that determine whether a voyage becomes a cherished memory or a headline. And the ocean, always watching, always waiting, always ready to test whether we have truly earned our place upon it.